died.
She was convinced she wasn't the robber's only victim.
He has done this many times, I believe, and is pretty professional. He would need to know access points and people's movements. So I would guess he's been doing surveillance on the property and surrounding areas for a while. The armed robber was all masked up and balaclavaed up. But what I did take note of is when he did say things to me, that there wasn't a foreign accent there.
Open it! Open the garage!
The thief stole almost £1.5 million worth of valuables. Detectives pieced together CCTV of the thief's escape and were able to map the journey he then took on the train.
He got the 5:38 p.m. from Hildenbroek train station. He gets off the train at Tunbridge train station, where he then gets on the next train. He gets off at Marden train station, and he has then cycled, leaving Marden train station at 6:02 p.m.
They were then able to build up a profile of the armed robber.
He is a white male, exceptionally large build. A distinctive feature is his muscular arms. He had trainers on with very distinctive red soles. It was a warm, hot, sunny day, and the clothing that the offender was wearing, I think, would have stood out to his fellow passengers as being unusual. What's striking about this case is that he appears to have a loss of control. There was no need for him to be so violent towards her. This contrasts with how meticulous and careful his planning is. I won't forget the first time I watched the CCTV. Her screams will remain with me, and I'm determined to try and catch this man.
You can't just forget about it. You think about it every day. You're wary of people. You suspect everybody now. I did not see the reason why he had to slit my head open. Maybe that's a sadistic streak he's got in him. But yeah, a complete coward.
I'm now joined by Detective Inspector Maxine Harris from the Kent and Essex Serious Crime Directorate. Maxine, this must have been an absolutely terrifying ordeal for the victim there. Can you just remind us of those key points of when and where this occurred?
Yeah, this was an aggravated burglary that happened in Sevenoaks in Kent, happened near to Wilderness Golf Course between 3:55 p.m. and 4:35 p.m. on Friday, the 21st of June 2024.
And you got a pretty good overview that you managed to piece together of the suspect's movements both before and after the event.
That's right. We know that he starts his day in Staplehurst. He's on a pedal cycle. He's cycling on Marden Road, and he's taken the train from Staplehurst train station to Sevenoaks train station and then cycled to the scene.
And then after the event, he's used the same sort of method to travel back, hasn't he? And we can see here his movements again on a pedal cycle and using the rail network.
He has cycled along Park Lane, Sevenoaks. He's taken the train from Hildenbroek train station at 5:38 p.m. He has got off that train at Tunbridge, changed train, and then got off a different train at 6 p.m. at Marden train station. And our last sighting of him is at 6:14 p.m. on the same road as the first sighting, only half a mile away.
How would you describe the suspect?
He is an exceptionally large build male. He's got very muscular arms. He was wearing distinctive red-soled trainers, and he's got thin layered clothing that he's layered up with a beige cap, and he was wearing a face mask on the train. He sought to disguise his identity by changing and putting a high-vis jacket on and taking it off.
OK, it was a very hot day. It's worth reminding viewers that he may well have stood out just because of what he was clothing at the time. He also had a bag on him, didn't he, at the time? And you've got a similar one here in the studio. We can see that. How would you describe the bag?
So we think it's from a make called Timbuktu. It's a messenger-style bag. Also with the bag was a bicycle. He was using a road bike. That road bike is from the late 90s, early 2000s. It was set up for someone who knew about cycling, and in particular, quite distinctive were some aero bars that are at the front going off the handlebars.
So that was a site with the type of bars where the rider would be leant over on the bars, and their hands would be in a forward position on top. You often see them with the higher-end road bikes, but it could suggest that the person knows a thing or two about cycling.
It could do, and it is a hypothesis because he is moving quite quickly. We know that from where we've viewed the CCTV footage.
We've also got the audio clip that we can actually hear the suspect's voice. Now, we're going to play that now.
Open it. Open the garage. Open the garage.
That's the key at the garage.
Open the garage.
I'm opening it.
Open it.
I'm opening it.
I mean, it is chilling hearing those words, but it is so important, and you wanted to play this today because someone might recognise that voice or clues as to where that voice is from. You've actually had a linguistic expert analyse that footage. What have they concluded?
Yeah, so what the linguistic expert tells us is that his voice is likely from the more prosperous areas of the southern counties. We have a QR code where people can listen to that voice. I think they can access it from your website. I would ask the public to listen to it, see if they recognise those mannerisms.
Yeah, because it's really important we identify who this is. How can our viewers help you today?
What I need is for someone to tell me this man's name. I recognise that they might be too frightened, so they can give that anonymously through Crime Stoppers, who are offering a £10,000 reward for any information that leads to his conviction.
Thank you, Maxine. You can contact Crime Stoppers on the dedicated telephone number below, or contact us if you have any information.
I'm with PC Natalie Booler from South Yorkshire Police now for our next appeal. Good to have you with us in the studio, Natalie. Tell us more about this case.
Good morning. This is a single vehicle fatal collision that occurred in October last year. A vehicle was driving at speed through Gleadless Town End when it struck a pedestrian in the carriageway. Sadly, victim, 42-year-old Damien Votalevic, died at the scene, having sustained catastrophic injuries.
And Natalie, what's really shocking about this is the fact that the driver didn't even stop.
No, he didn't. He left Damien in the road.
Well, let's talk through the details of exactly where and when this happened. We've got a map that we can take a look at. Just talk us through this.
OK, so the collision occurred on the 24th of October at 8:27 p.m. last year. And it happened on Ridgeway Road. This is a multi-carriageway road and it's governed by a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit, and the area is known locally as Gleadless Town End. We know that prior to the collision, a number of vehicles passed through that junction, and we also know that the offending vehicle was travelling at speed through this junction when he struck the pedestrian.
As you say, after the collision, the driver continued. We've got another map to actually illustrate where he went. Just talk us through what we're seeing here.
OK, so following the collision, the vehicle has continued from Gleadless Town End along Ridgeway Road, turning right onto Hollins End Road. And it's continued its journey towards Intake, along Hollybank Road, and then it's made its way up Normanton Hill and heading towards Richmond. And then as it's travelled along Richmond Road, it's turned left onto Richmond Hall Road, where we know it's travelled through the estate, and the last sighting of the vehicle is on Spinkhill Avenue.
We've actually got some CCTV footage, haven't we, of the driver in question going incredibly fast, Natalie.
Yeah, so as you can see from the footage, the vehicle is travelling significantly faster than other vehicles that are on the carriageway. And following the collision, the damage that was sustained by that vehicle would have been easy to spot.
Well, you urgently want to locate the vehicle. Tell us a bit more about it.
Okay. So inquiries have led us to believe that this vehicle is either being stored or hidden following the collision. We know that it's a black Volkswagen Golf, a 2016 model, bearing registration Alpha Juliet 16 Foxtrot Lima Echo. A distinctive feature on this vehicle is that the rear driver's side alloy wheel is very different to that of the others on the vehicle. We have a witness that describes this vehicle accelerating through 3 red traffic lights prior to the collision. And we know that following the collision, the vehicle sustained quite a lot of damage, and this includes a creased bonnet, and most noticeably, the front passenger headlight became detached from the vehicle. And although it was detached, it was still illuminated and swinging by its cable. We can't be certain from CCTV, but we also believe that the windscreen sustained damage as well.
And crucially, you want to actually find this man we can take a look at linked to the vehicle before the collision. That's
correct. This is 35-year-old Keelan Winfrey. And we believe that he was the sole occupant of the vehicle at the time of the collision. He's a well-built mixed-race male, and he's got a distinctive beard and a shaven head. He is wanted in connection with this inquiry, and we believe that he's fled the country.
How can the viewers help today, Natalie?
Well, so far we've interviewed 2 people on suspicion of assisting an offender, and they currently remain on bail for those offences. It's paramount to this investigation that we locate this vehicle, as it could hold key evidence. We're appealing to witnesses that know or have any information as to the whereabouts of that vehicle. Even just knowing that that vehicle has been destroyed would be of great help. We're also appealing to witnesses or anyone who knows any information, not just about the vehicle, but also about Keelan Winfrey too. And finally, we appeal to Keelan, come forward and speak to us.
Natalie, thank you so much. If you do recognise this car, if you have any information at all on this case, then please do pick up the phone. Our details are on your screen.
Next, a wild investigation into a man who thought he'd found an infinite money loop after a glitch allowed him to nick, get this, £25 million.
This was a multi-million-pound fraud investigation. 4 years piecing together tens of thousands of pieces of evidence, recovering assets from all over the world. It was definitely the most complex investigation of my career.
On the 5th of December 2017, a man named James Parker reported a theft of Bitcoin to Lancashire Police.
He'd left his laptop unattended in a hotel bar. Someone had logged onto his laptop and withdrawn a load of Bitcoin whilst his back was turned. And we could never properly identify a suspect in that case. So that investigation was closed.
9 months later, police received a second report of a seemingly unrelated case of Bitcoin theft.
Kelly Caton had reported a named person had stolen her phone and taken 15 Bitcoin. At the time, that was £75,000.
The suspect was interviewed and gave the police 2 key pieces of information.
She directed us towards a man who lived in a hotel in Fleetwood. That person is James Parker.
She told them the source of the stolen Bitcoin was an Australian crypto exchange, a platform where you can buy, sell and trade cryptocurrency. Police contacted them and were astounded by what they heard.
They told us they'd lost 40 million Australian dollars to the fraud. At the time, that was worth about 22 million pounds in sterling. The cybercrime team had just interviewed the suspect, so they come to see me with this frankly unbelievable story of millions of pounds and unknown suspects.
It turned out the crypto exchange company unknowingly had a glitch on their website. Users were able to exploit this fault and receive bitcoins for free.
It was basically like you advertise something for sale for £100. You click buy, you get £100, but you keep your product. So it's £100 out of thin air each time they used the glitch. There was 5 customer accounts that used this glitch, 4 of which had been opened with very basic details, but one of the accounts had been set up with the name and address and a phone number. That account belonged to James Parker.
And so detectives launched an investigation into James Parker.
He lived quite a modest life. He didn't travel very much, he didn't have a car, he hadn't worked for many, many years. His bank balance never went over a couple of £100. Suddenly his standard of living completely changed. Tens of thousands of pounds is moving around his accounts on a daily basis. I ring James Parker's bank, and what I learned was staggering. Millions of pounds floating around. This is clearly going to be a huge investigation.
Parker seemed to have access to an endless supply of money, splashing the cash anywhere he could, leaving big tips and taking lavish holidays.
Parker would buy cars for people, one of them just a random person in the pub. Parker bought 10 Amazon gift cards worth £5,000 each, so he gave them out, including one to a homeless person. He bought diamond jewellery for friends, he gave loans to people whose names he couldn't remember. He was literally giving money away.
With such huge sums of money passing through his account, the bank had become suspicious and frozen his accounts. And so Parker found an independent financial advisor to help legitimise his wealth, Stephen Boys.
As someone who's regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, Stephen should have been asking questions. Where did this money come from? Is this legitimate? It would appear that the money on offer to Stephen personally was so great that he was happy to represent his client in any way that was required. He then starts putting pressure on the banks to free up James's accounts.
He successfully had the accounts unlocked. But lured by the prospect of making huge sums of money himself, Boys started using new ways to launder the money.
They start going on holiday to Dubai. They start buying villas. They start buying gold, jewellery, and flying it back to the UK in their suitcase. But the more money they have, the more problems they begin to suffer. Stephen Boys finds himself in Dubai with £1 million in a suitcase, which is a very difficult situation to be in. You can't go to the airport, you'll get stopped. You can't go to the nearest bank and deposit it because they will start asking questions. So what do? He finds his local friendly Russians and buys a villa off them in the back office of an estate agent's. He then has the audacity to whinge that it took the Russians all day to count all those banknotes one by one.
Parker was paying Stephen Boys an extortionate amount of money for his services.
James had paid Stephen £90,000 to clear his mortgage. He'd bought his mother a car. He'd bought his wife diamond jewellery. It was all criminal.
Police were on to Parker and Boys, but they knew there were others involved, and so they turned their attention to identifying the other crypto crooks.
And we'll find out what happened to Parker Boys and the rest of the crypto crooks a little later on in the programme. First, though, last year, motorcycle riders made up 20% of road fatalities, which is an extraordinary figure when they account for less than 1% of road traffic.
And we're now with Mary Lomas, who's a solicitor who advocates for motorcyclists who have suffered life-changing injuries, and Carol Close and Sergeant Adam van der Sand from Staffordshire Police to talk about how riders can stay safe on the roads. Good morning to you all. If I could start with you, Carol and Adam, you both work on something that's called Doc Bike.
Yes.
Carol, can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, Doc Bike was founded in 2013 by a critical care consultant who works on the air ambulance and a police motorcyclist. They kept meeting and kept bumping into each other at the scenes of fatalities, motorcycle fatalities, and decided to get together and do something about this. And that's where the charity was born, and injury prevention. You know, getting there first and stopping these accidents from happening is the main thing. We started the charity in 2019 in Staffordshire.
It's so important. It's of paramount importance, isn't it? And actually your involvement within this, Carol, has sadly come through your own experiences of motorcycle collisions.
Yes, I lost my youngest son, Luke, in the August of 2019 in a motorcycle accident. He was a police officer in Staffordshire. He was riding off duty and sadly we lost him. We really wanted to do something as a family to prevent other families from experiencing the heartache and the trauma that we've gone through and still going through.
So sorry to hear that.
Yeah, sorry, Carol. And Adam, Staffordshire Doc Bikes actually supports another course where riders can learn all these skills, how to keep themselves safer on the road should the worst happen.
Yeah, so one of a number of courses we sort of support and help is Biker Down. So there's three elements to that really. The first one around scene management. So if you do come across something, what to do, how to keep yourself safe. Try and resist the urge to perhaps rush in and become another casualty yourself. Often the best thing you can do is warn other road users and contact the emergency services. The next one around casualty care, so what you can do if you do need to help a motorcyclist who's come off the motorbike. The course focuses on like specific injury around that, so things like removing the helmets, CPR, dealing with traumatic bleeding and things such as that. And the final one we call the science of being seen, so that's a lot around how you can position yourself safely on the roads and differently to be seen, as you're obviously a lot smaller than most other road users, and also things around wearing conspicuous clothing, reflective clothing that stands out from your surroundings as well to help all with the prevention of being involved in an accident.
Absolutely. And Mary, within your profession as a solicitor, you see the effects of bike accidents, you know, day after day, but there are some innovations that can help when it comes to safety. Tell us about data carriers.
Yes, so we supply medical data carriers to motorcyclists. We've supplied around 10 to 15,000 over the past few years. It's a really simple piece of equipment. It's attached to the side of the helmet. Motorcyclists can put all their information on the piece of paper that's slotted inside, any medications that they're on, any allergies that they have. They can put that on there, so if they come off and they're unconscious at the scene of an accident, the first responders have that information to hand straight away to give them life-saving treatment. So it's a really important piece of kit to go alongside the other kit that you're wearing to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, really important. And so simple as well. And wearing the right kit, I know, is a really important thing for you, Mary. It's important in your line of work when you see people that come in to the cases that are not adequately protected. It's important, isn't it? And Adam, just last word from you, wearing the right kit, is that something you would always suggest for riders who go out?
Massively important, particularly like sometimes if you're in hot weather and the temptation is not to wear it. So wearing bits like we've got in here today, stuff that's up to standard, British standards, helmets, proper protective jackets, gloves, trousers and boots is essential to prevent injury or loss of life.
So important, isn't Adam, Carol, Mary, thank you so much for coming in and telling us more. You're doing really important work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And for more information on biking safely, you can head to docbike.org. Now back to the Bitcoin scammer and the detective hot on his lead.
Whilst the evidence against Parker and Boys was mounting, DS Wainwright was also investigating 2 other cryptocurrency accounts linked to the Bitcoin theft.
I identified a barman. He worked in the hotel that James Parker had moved into. He befriended James Parker and became his personal assistant. His name was Jordan Robinson. He hadn't stolen quite as much as James Parker, but we're still talking several £1 million worth of Bitcoin. Prior to this criminality, not much money in his bank account at all. Suddenly, tens of thousands of pounds are passing through his bank account. He's having nights at the local casinos, gambling thousands of pounds, which is easy to do when it's not your money.
The final account was linked to a name already known to the police.
I identified a lady in Blackpool who lived in very modest means, but suddenly became very, very affluent. Her name was Kelly Caton. She's a lady who previously reported to us that an acquaintance of hers had stolen 15 Bitcoin from her. Suddenly, I'm looking at a very different picture.
In March 2019, police simultaneously raided the suspects' homes.
I'm in charge of all these different search teams. I look inside Parker's house. And what we found was a man with more money than he knew what to spend on. He bought these 3-foot-tall elephants made with the material like you see on a shiny disco ball. He has a 75-inch television that I think had been dropped on the floor at some point. He'd bought drones, remote control boats. This was a man who had more money that he knew what to do with.
The suspects were all arrested and brought in for questioning.
James Parker tries to refuse to answer. He initially starts saying no comment, but can't help himself and starts talking.
Do you own any cryptocurrencies?
Bitcoin, Litecoin.
Tell me about those.
Oof, no comment.
Stephen Boy is a bit more intelligent. He replies no comment to everything throughout.
No comment.
Whereas Jordan Robinson talked.
At one point, I saw him withdraw £30,000.
And talked.
He said, there's dodgy Russians going about.
And talked. Couldn't shut him up.
When he came back in March, he had a kilo bar of gold.
A wealth of information for me to then react to. And Kelly Caton again tried to reply no comment, but did start to drip feed us bits of information.
I can't remember the exact details of how the glitch was exploited or worked or whatever, but...
Police seized dozens of mobile phones, laptops, computers and SIM cards and started a detailed digital forensic analysis which confirmed the links between the suspects.
Reading the text messages and the emails between them all, it was very clear the relationship between Parker and Boys was particularly soured. Parker realised that the home he lived in wasn't his own. Boys had registered in his name, and they kicked off massively.
Boys sneakily signing over Parker's house to himself was just the beginning of the fighting between the two of them.
It then escalated when Parker asked for a Rolex watch to be bought for him when Boys went on holiday to Dubai. When Boys returned home, he realised that the watch he'd bought was slightly wrong. Parker kicked off. He smashed it with a hammer and threw it in a skip. When Boys decided to end his relationship with Parker, he pulls out this homemade contract. Parker keeps the bricks and mortar, worth about £500,000, whereas Boys was allowed to keep the contents of the bank balance, well over £1 million. He properly ripped off his client at that stage. There is no honour amongst thieves. They were all clearly trying to rip each other off by this stage.
In total, Parker and his gang had stolen the equivalent of £25 million in Bitcoin.
So during the investigation, Parker's health was failing. he was suffering quite badly with COPD. He told me himself when I last interviewed him he would die soon. In the weeks immediately before the Crown Prosecution Service charged James Parker, his health got the better of him. A lifestyle of years smoking and drinking in close confinement must have ruined his lungs, and ultimately COPD finished him off. I have very mixed feelings when James Parker died. Sad that he's died, frustrated he won't see justice, disappointed for the victim company that wanted to see him imprisoned for what he'd done.
In 2022, the remaining defendants pleaded not guilty to all charges brought against them.
This is now 4 years into the investigation. The big challenge for me, by the time we got to court, is making sure the jury understood the material. This is a complex investigation. The volume of material is massive.
After a 4-week trial, the jury found all the defendants guilty. Stephen Boys was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment for converting criminal property. Kelly Caton was sentenced to 4.5 years for conspiracy to commit fraud, 2 years for acquisition of criminal property, and 2 years for converting criminal property. Jordan Robinson was sentenced to 4.5 years for conspiracy to commit fraud, 2 years for acquisition of criminal property, and 2 years for converting criminal property.
There was a massive sense of relief when the guilty verdicts were read out. Not one of the suspects showed any remorse. This is a multi-million-pound fraud investigation. I spent 4 years piecing together thousands of pieces of evidence and recovering money from all over the world. It was easily the most complex investigation of my career.
I mean, what an investigation, but good to see justice served at the end. Now, South Wales Police are one of the UK-wide forces who use facial recognition as part of their policing, and they've just launched a new mobile app which can confirm someone's identity at the touch of a button. I'm joined now by Inspector Ben Guire and Sergeant Chris Lawrence from South Wales Police. Good to have you with us in the studio. Tell us more, how does it work?
So basically, we've built an app where it uses our facial recognition algorithm that we use in South Wales Police. And where there's a policing purpose, we can capture some basic justification details as to why we're using it, take a picture of an individual, and if they are in our database, it will bring back a match straight away with a high degree of accuracy for the operator then to make a decision as to whether it's correct or not.
OK, so like day-to-day in real time, how is it helping your officers?
So there's the obvious ones, really. It's helping us identify suspects who give us false details or are unwilling to identify themselves and identify them for crimes that they might have committed. But there's also sort of the compassionate angle as well, where people who might be in medical crisis or might have passed away, we're able to identify them more quickly, meaning that their next of kin can be told more quickly rather than finding out through social media and other veins. And obviously we can then identify that person and help them more quickly.
Of course, that makes so much sense. It could make a real difference, couldn't it? Can we have a little run of how it works then? Let's see it in action.
Yeah, of course. So this is the main data capture screen.
Yeah.
And I've pre-populated it there. So we'll use the inspector as our model. And
Lovely
I take
stuff.
a photo of him there, very professional. And then from here you can crop out. So if there was any other people in the background, etc., you can really focus in on the face.
So it was like a busy background.
Yeah, and then hit submit.
And what that's just loading up on the
yeah, so it's sending that
now.
image to our facial recognition server and it's comparing it, and it'll only bring back matches above the set threshold. And from there, then, you can compare the photo you've just taken against the file image that we hold.
I mean, that's in a matter of moments, isn't it? Really useful tool. I mean, facial recognition, it's still somewhat controversial, isn't it? I mean, what would you say to anybody that has questions around it?
Absolutely. So we've had our algorithm tested independently by the National Physical Laboratory. And what we found was that at the settings that we've got now, there is no evidence of bias towards any demographic group, so ethnicity, age or gender. But also what we've then got is a set of sort of scrutiny and oversight systems starting with the officer supervisor, making sure that the searches are being conducted properly, and going right the way up through the organisation to our police and crime commissioners, and ultimately to independent regulators such as the ICO and the biometrics and surveillance camera commissioners.
OK, that's good to hear that it's covering all bases, isn't it? And it has had some successes so far.
Absolutely. Obviously, it is only comparing against our own databases. So what we've had within that is a member of public in Gwent who was found unconscious. We weren't able to identify him. As a result of using the app, we were able to find out he had family nearby. It meant that he didn't have to go to the hospital and be looked after all night. We were able to get him to someone who was able to look after him. And it was one of the nights where it was particularly cold, so had he been left out, he probably would have come to quite significant harm. And then we've had a second one, which was quite a recent one, a male acting suspiciously around cars, stopped by officers, refused to provide details. And when they've actually stopped him, he's a wanted burglar.
Amazing. You know, really good to hear that it's working with some real life examples there. Thank you so much for coming in and telling us more. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Rav.
Great tech, but now it's time for Wanted Faces. First, do you know a Bradley Dwyer? Though he uses the nicknames Faz and Farron, GMP want to question him about the large-scale importation and distribution of drugs. He's 39, has links to Salford and Oldham in Greater Manchester and also Dubai. Or what about Sean Green? He failed to appear in court after police in Cumbria charged him with conspiracy to supply drugs. He's 28, known to operate in the North Cumbria area. Or how about Jack Treadwell? He's been recalled to prison for breaching the conditions of his licence. He's 23, 6 foot tall, has a number of tattoos, including the words Nan and Pap on his wrists. Police say he has links to Milton Keynes, Buckinghamshire, Northamptonshire and Bedfordshire. And lastly, have you seen Stephen Mumford? He's also known as Stephen Richard Persaud. Wayne, Percy, Darren, Sean and also Mohammed. He's been recalled to prison for breaching his licence. He's 43 with a range of tattoos, including the words Stephen, Zainab and a heart with the word forever in it. He has links to Oxford, Carlisle and Somerset. If you spot them, please do give us a call. Thank you so much for watching this morning and for all your calls. If you've missed any of the series so far, you can catch it up on iPlayer for up to 30 days after broadcast.
Tomorrow, how the brave actions of a team of officers were put to the ultimate test after an uncontrollable fire tore through a caravan site.
The fireball spanned a good 50 to 100 metres into the air. We need to get out of here now.
Shocking. See you tomorrow at 10:45. Bye for now.
When you hear there's a murder, it can frighten people.
I was so shocked that something like that would happen in a lovely village like this.
They seemed to be happy with each other, everyone loved her, and she got along with everyone.
There were concerns about their welfare. The alarm bells were raised.
They had heard things happening, shouting, fights.
It was weird. It's as if he was trying to tell us something.
He went off on what can only be described as a drink and drugs binge. Ultimately, it led to the tragic death of a lovely, caring wife.
Lovely woman who was taken away from us by a horrible, sadistic man.
Situated in the stunning rolling wolds of North Lincolnshire lies the peaceful village of Worlaby.
I've lived in Worlaby for 48 years. It's a really nice, quiet village. Everybody seems to know everybody. We get on really well.
Last year, we won the best kept village. It's a nice little village, plenty of activities, plenty going on.
It's so quiet, it's a little rural idyll, if you like. It's like going back in time living here. There's very little crime, it's beautiful, and it's a wonderful place to live for young families or retired people, and we've got all of them here.
Friendly community, everybody seemed like pretty much okay, you know.
There's a lot of people who help each other, so there is quite a lot of good community atmosphere.
And it is a lovely place to live. It's really nice.
So it's the ideal place for Ian Hamer and wife Joanne to set up home.
We're fairly new to the village. I think they've only been here about 5 years in total.
I think I met her once. She seemed a really nice lady.
Joanne in particular seems to throw herself into village life.
Joanne was liked by everyone on the road. Outgoing, always out on the streets, speaking to each other. Ian, you would never see. He would be in his home quite a lot. Joanne, complete opposite. Everyone loved her, a really welcoming woman, and she got along with everyone. And so people wanted to open up to her, and that's why I think she quickly integrated into Worthy and loved living there.
Joanne also has a successful career at the local council where she manages their healthy lifestyle service. After 6 years there, she's risen to become the public face of their healthy living campaigns.
She was quite a bright, some would say a brilliant person who had a quite substantial job working with the local authority and really independently minded in some respects.
Just a lovely woman who did wonders for the council. Everyone loved her at the council, and no one had a bad word to say about her.
Ian Hamer, Joanne's husband of 27 years, works as a self-employed business consultant.
He worked in many businesses and earning money here and there, and to sustain a reasonable living. You know, he had a nice place in Worlby, quite an expensive area to live in, so he must have been doing okay in his profession, I guess. They seemed to be happy with each other. Friends and family said that there was a good couple for the large part. Married a long time, nice family, 3 kids. It was all seemingly going well.
But what seems like an idyllic life is about to change.
Humberside Police, what's your emergency?
Humberside Police are called after Joanne fails to turn up for work. Her elderly mother has also been trying to reach her, to no avail.
They did speak most days, if not every day, because her mother was very ill as well. And Joanne used to help to look after her. And that raised sufficient concern for her to ring the police.
There were concerns about her welfare. The alarm bells were raised.
And a concern for welfare incident was generated, which resulted in the police attending.
Police make their way over to the family home. When they knock on the door, there's no answer. So the officers break in. When they search through the house, nothing could prepare police for what they find in the master bedroom. Joanne Hamer's lying lifeless on her bed.
Medical professionals will have been called immediately. You know, monitors would have been placed on to see if there's any signs of heart trace or anything. Any chance whatsoever that resuscitation could take place.
They had discovered she was dead. It's apparent she'd been killed from the scene, where she was left, and there was blood at the scene as well.
Joanne had been strangled by her dressing gown cord.
That's when we're looking at securing evidence within that scene.
Teams of police descend on Worlby. The quiet village has never seen anything like it.
When I came back from work, there was police cars, vans, and I'm saying, what's going on? What on earth's all the police doing here? Something happened, and then when I got home and my daughter texted me and said she'd seen it, that there'd been a murder. I just couldn't believe it. I was so shocked that something like that would happen in a lovely village like this. You don't expect it.
As word spreads fast through the neighbourhood, the local newspaper gets wind of an incident in Worlby. Reporter Charlie Wilson heads to the scene.
So you're like, OK, we've got a big story. Let's get there first. Let's be quick. Let's be first. So we got down there. We were the first people there. Very quickly, it was evident this could be a very serious, scary incident. I've never reported on a murder before. That's the first time that's happened to me. So it was a case of doing it really delicately, respectfully, and just trying to build up what had happened, really.
Soon the news is spreading beyond the boundaries of the village.
Maybe an hour later, you get the likes of ITV, BBC, Sky coming down, and that's when it was like, whoa, OK, people out on the road, like, wondering what's going on. Yeah, everyone was shocked to see the amount of media attention.
You just don't get this sort of thing in these sort of villages.
Yeah, I was quite shocked, really. You would never think that something would happen in a small community like this. I couldn't believe it.
Everybody was shocked. It didn't seem right. Something like that would happen here. You hear about it in cities, but in a little quiet Lincolnshire village, you just don't expect it at all.
Joanne's family are left devastated by the news, and her colleagues at work are also reeling.
Truly sad. I spoke to a few of them. They were just in pieces. Of course they would be. Their colleague who they loved dearly, and they really did love her. It was tough for them. It was very tough.
And it dawns on Joe's village that there's a killer living in their midst.
I think some people were a little bit upset. They were locking the doors a bit more quickly.
I think the first reaction is alarm, because when you hear there's a murder but you don't know the circumstances, and it can frighten people into thinking we've got a killer at large who's going to cause more trouble. You're quite fearful about what it could mean and what the implications for the future are.
It was very awful to hear that it had happened in our village. It's frightening. It really is.
With fear spreading quickly throughout the village, Humberside Police needs to work fast to establish who committed this horrendous crime. And first, they look at Joanne's home life.
This marriage on the surface, to all intents and purposes, would have looked like a stable, normal marriage without too many problems. The reality was quite different.
What I heard was that their marriage wasn't great by the people on the road who lived there, because they had heard things happening, let's just say, whether it be shouting, fights.
It turns out Joanne and Ian had recently had a trial separation, but then Joanne decided to return to the family home.
Joanne Hamer had sought to see if she could give the relationship one last chance. This was part of her trying to make the relationship work.
This new information puts husband Ian in a new light.
Maybe Joanne tried to keep certain things to herself to hide what was really going on at the home to save her marriage.
With Ian Hamer nowhere to be seen, police suspicions are starting to build.
We do know in this particular case that a neighbour had reported an argument in the morning between them.
I spoke to the woman who heard the incident around 4 o'clock in the morning, around that time. She had heard screams, shouts for help.
And then the argument ceased.
Police launch an urgent public appeal to help them find Joanne's husband. They need to track down Ian Hamer, and fast. In the quiet Lincolnshire village of Worlaby, police have launched a murder hunt. Mother of 3, Joanne Hamer, has been found strangled in her bed. Husband Ian has mysteriously disappeared since a row reported by neighbours in the early hours of the morning. And this doesn't seem to be the first, either.
I guess people on the road had heard these things where it really went bad, to say the least. None of the neighbours who I spoke to liked him at all.
With Ian Hamer now under suspicion, Humberside Police make an urgent appeal for his whereabouts. They release the details of his car, a white BMW 5 Series. They also warn the public not to approach him.
Once a decision had been made by the senior investigating officer that Ian Hamer was a suspect for this crime, then a manhunt would have taken place. They don't know at the moment where he is. but there was be certain fast-track actions raised to secure his arrest. You know, checks with family and friends. Where does he usually go to? Where does he work? Checks with hospitals as well. If he's got a mobile phone, has he made any calls? We may be able to cell site to where he's located and instigate an area search. He's clearly got use of a vehicle in this case. So, you know, we'd be putting the vehicle details onto the automatic number plate recognition, the ANPR system. And as soon as that vehicle passes an ANPR camera, then that will send an alert to the police. All these inquiries made to trace and arrest Ian Hamer.
He plainly was the last person with her and had disappeared from the scene. So the investigation then was focusing on building that picture around what had happened between them. And then going further back, what had happened between them not just on that night, but also in the period leading up to this.
Detectives put Ian Hamer under the microscope.
The picture that emerged from witnesses was of somebody who was supremely self-assured, self-confident, and superficially was, or at least on the face of it, was somebody who was quite engaging and interesting. But those same people always spoke about, the more they got to know him, there appeared to be another side to him. And they also described how, over time, he could present as being very self-interested and, I suppose, conceited. So there was somebody who could, when he wanted to present in a way which was superficially attractive, but the more people got to know him, there was to him which was unattractive in terms of him being controlling, perhaps aggressive.
And after speaking to Joanne's family and friends, it turns out Hamer has a checkered history.
There have been a number of previous reports made indicating domestic violence. You know, he was reported to have ripped up her wedding dress.
Most reports of him tearing up a teddy bear, which was sentimental to her.
You know, this is really significant in a case such as this.
The police had been called out on many occasions, but as is so often the case, they weren't really ever progressed. Part of that was because of the approach of the family to try and manage what was happening within the family. The personality of Joanne Hamer was, tragically, to try and make it work at all times.
When you're married to someone for so long, you want to, make things work. And she shouldn't be thought of wrongly for that, for wanting to make her marriage with her husband of 27 years and 3 children work. It's just that he was so far gone and so far twisted.
There are a number of occasions where she left him, but he managed to persuade her to come back. And I've investigated, sadly, domestic homicides where controlling and abusive husbands have tried to isolate their wives, and we know that Hamer did this and, dissuading her from contact with family and friends.
In 2013, police discover this came to a head when Ian Hamer started divorce proceedings, blaming the involvement of Joanne's mother in their relationship.
So, he was antagonistic towards his wife's relationship with her own mother. So he was all about controlling and being abusive towards his wife and driving a wedge between her and family and friends. And it just shows this controlling and coercive and bullying and domineering nature of Ian Hamer towards his wife within that relationship. And that isn't uncommon in domestic homicide cases, sadly.
It seems the couple reconciled. But then in 2017, things take another turn for the worse. Ian Hamer starts accusing his wife of having affairs. Police analysis of Joanne's smartphone reveals something even more sinister. Around this time, Hamer hacked into his wife's handset so he could track her every move.
He would apparently follow her to work, follow her on nights out with friends, monitor her phone on where she was going, where she was at, wouldn't let her do certain things, apparently, wear certain things, and she was a bit closed off.
This is how obsessive he was about his wife and his jealousy and his thought processes, that he wanted to accuse her of extramarital affairs.
And a probe of the couple's bank accounts shows Ian's disturbingly tight grip over her purse strings.
He was keeping money from her, basically, like, I guess sort of giving her an allowance of what to spend and what she could do, wouldn't let her go out at certain times. All the bearings of, you know, a toxic, horrible relationship. Obviously, she felt trapped. She felt like she needed to get out, and she tried to do that. He wouldn't let her.
In the weeks before her death, Joanne had moved out and was considering buying a property. But she was persuaded by Ian to return, 2 days before her murder. It was on this day, the 4th of May, that police background checks reveal a disturbing incident. Ian Hamer had been arrested for drink driving.
As well as being controlling and abusive towards his wife, he seemed to be losing control of his own life in some respects. He was drinking more heavily. So there's a clear pattern there of his own destructive behaviour escalating within himself, and particularly abusing alcohol as part of that process.
Investigators discover it's not only drink that's fueling Hamer's abusive behaviour.
He had a cocaine problem that had become prevalent in his life over the last 2 or 3 years, and that became worse and worse and worse. When he picked up this addiction, maybe his personality changed because of that, and his health, mental and physical, deteriorated.
Businessman Ian Hamer's respectable lifestyle is now questionable. And when they learn what he did in the hours following the estimated time of Joanne's murder, they're convinced they have the right man. Soon after that last blazing row reported by neighbours, Joanne's mother said she had an unsettling phone call with her son-in-law.
When family members tried to contact her the following morning, he told them that Joanne Hamer couldn't speak to them because she was unwell, and as he framed it, she had a sore throat.
Chillingly, police believe Joanne was already dead when Hamer made that calculating comment.
Just, like, sick. Like, strangle her, and then you got to tell her mum that she can't come because she's got a bad throat. Like, sadistic. Like, horrible. When you hear that, it's just like, I don't know what to say. Horrible.
And it appears Hamer used the same story again.
His son had attended at the marital home at a time when Joanne Hamer was probably dead, and that's when he first introduced that concept of her having a sore throat, when he knew she'd been strangled and she was probably dead.
He also told his son as well, when he was at the house, to go and buy some lozenges because his mother was sleeping, she had a bad throat, knowing full well that he'd strangled her, which, now we know what happened, was particularly chilling in this case. To say that she'd got a bad throat, I mean, how callous is that?
And therefore the question is, was that him being cruel, or was it him buying time?
This cunning ploy tells police they have a calculating killer on the run, who wants to stay one step ahead of them. But it's only a matter of time before a false move by Hamer would reveal where he's hiding. Worleby, North Lincolnshire. Murder suspect Ian Hamer is on the run after his wife Joanne is found strangled in their bedroom.
And this is a man who, at this point, everyone in the area is looking for and knows that, okay, this is a manhunt.
As police cast their search net wider, reporters like Charlie Wilson are on the ground looking for leads. Suddenly, that morning, there's word from nearby Barton-upon-Humber.
We heard news that there might be an incident in Barton where he might be. And so we went to Barton and then heard he was seen near a pub.
Barton is about 8 miles away, and it's quite big, quite a lot of people, so it's the obvious place to go. You've got the Humber Bridge. From the Humber Bridge, you've got the whole of Yorkshire to go into and disappear. It would be a logical place to go.
A resident next to one of the town's car parks spots a man behaving erratically.
He was basically swaying around in the car park, making noise, acting strange.
Not realising it's Humberside Police's most wanted, Ian Hamer, the woman calls 999 to report a disturbance.
I think she reported that he was on Spice and shouting. Obviously, he was actually drunk, intoxicated, on whatever he was on. He would wander around the car park, shout.
A lone patrol officer heads to the car park to move this wild drunkard on.
Police basically just found a man shouting and being strange and realised this is Ian Hamer. Arrested him straight away.
The officer single-handedly tackles Hamer to the floor, then restrains him whilst he radios for assistance.
I have to say the actions of the officer that arrested him were exemplary, you know, real bravery shown in tackling this individual. And when he was arrested, you know, he actually had to detain him. This is a rural force. It's not an inner-city force with the same number of resources.
Meanwhile, roving reporter Charlie Wilson is close by. Suddenly, he's alerted to the breaking news.
A woman sent me a picture of a man on the floor being sat on by a police officer. OK, that's our man. So we know exactly where it is. I'm actually at a shop getting a drink of Lucozade. Run around with my Lucozade in hand. So I arrive at the scene. Ian Hamer is being sat on by a lone police officer, waiting for his fellow officers to come. So to come round the corner and see a police officer sat on who we believe is Ian Hamer was just wild, yeah.
After struggling to contain Hamer for nearly 5 minutes alone, backup finally arrives for the officer.
They must have came, got half a second after I came round the corner, and then police swarmed on him, got him away, and sort of like ushered us away. Clearly intoxicated, drunk or drugs or both, not in his right frame of mind, in the clothes that he was wearing the night before. We get him up, handcuff him, escort him to the back of the van.
Meanwhile, news of an arrest for Joanne's murder filters back to her village of Worleby. Residents can now breathe a sigh of relief.
I was just pleased he'd been caught for the crime, but to then find out that it was her husband, it was a real shock.
Detectives start to piece together what Hamer's been up to in the last 24 hours since fleeing the murder scene.
He went off on what can only be described as a drink and drugs binge. We know that from the inquiries that were made. Laughing and joking, you know, certainly no signs of remorse or distress.
Bar owner Pauline Dickinson had reported serving Ian Hamer. But when he arrived on her premises, she had no idea he was on the run.
He came in the pub around 5:30, never seen him before, asked for a pint of Carling. He got his pint of Carling and went and sat down out the way of everybody.
Next, Hamer returns to the bar and starts to hit the spirits. Soon the conversation heads in a strange and unsettling direction.
Put the tequila on the bar and he literally looked either side of himself, leant over the bar and said to me, why did the Mexican push his wife off the cliff? So I did the same as he did, looked either side and said, to kill her? He went, no, you know it. I said, yeah, I do. He paid for his drinks, went and sat down. He came back to the bar 10, 15 minutes later and stood there.
Then Pauline clocked something sinister.
He hid his arm behind, but I'd already seen that he'd got scratches. I don't know which way, it was just you could see scratches on his wrist. One of my customers noticed scratches as well and went, oh, he's one of those who's been harming. One of my customers said to him, hey up mate, what are you doing in here? Are you from here? He says, no, he said, I'm not from here. I'm just going through a breakup with my wife. So he went, oh, right, sorry to hear that, mate. He went, yeah, she's taken me for all my money. So he said, don't be sad. He said, have another drink. So one of the customers bought him a drink.
Over the next few hours, Hamer knocks back the drinks, laughing and joking with the regulars.
So he did about 2 more jokes to the point where the customer said, no wonder your wife left you. If you've got jokes like that, he went, that's maybe why she's gone then.
Quite significantly as well, he was seen to take his wedding ring off. So he knows what's happened. He knows that his wife's dead. So, you know, that's quite a significant gesture. And that was done, you know, merely hours after he'd actually killed his wife. And it just shows the kind of individual that he is.
Some of the pub regulars seem unsettled by this customer they've never seen before, who has struck up conversation with another man at the bar.
My 2 regulars, they finished their drinks. I went, right, you 2 go in. I went, no, we're not going. Says, why? We're not leaving you with them 2. We don't know the other guys, so we're not leaving you with them. I went, oh, don't be daft. What are these 2 going to do to me? I'll soon have them out the door, don't worry. So they went, no, we're staying. So they stayed.
Soon the bar's regulars saw glimpses of another side to their joking acquaintance, who's going by a false name, Sebastian.
So we played pool against one of my regulars, who is a really good player. And during the game, there was banter going on. But right at the end, when the customer knew he was going to win, he picked up the broom that I'd got out ready to clean up and potted Black with the broom. Which Sebastian said, that is so disrespectful to do that. He said, I don't think so, I still won. I don't think he was very pleased and finished his drink, and he did actually walk out. You just get a feeling about people. You know if they're not okay. I don't think he would have done any harm, but who knows?
Next morning, Pauline's alerted to the terrifying news on Facebook that the customer she had served the night before isn't called Sebastian, but Ian Hamer. And he's wanted by police for murder.
My reaction was, oh my God. So I phoned a policeman that I know, and within 5-10 minutes, I think, they'd got him.
Soon the joke Hamer told Pauline about a man pushing his wife off a cliff takes on a sinister new meaning.
It was weird, but they were just jokes, like, you know what, a kid would come home and tell you jokes, but it's not until the following day, and I actually thought to myself, it's as if he was trying to tell us something. I don't know. It's not until the following day that things fell into place.
Despite his intoxicated state, Ian Hamer engages with the police at the point of his arrest.
He says something like, it wasn't murder, it was manslaughter. Something along those lines. I heard the word manslaughter.
He he did make a very significant statement, an unsolicited comment to the officer indicating that he wasn't guilty of murder. It was diminished responsibility, so he was already offering up a statutory defence to murder.
After 24 hours on the run, Ian Hamer has been arrested in North Lincolnshire on suspicion of murder. Just hours after killing his wife, Joanne, Hamer was spotted in Pauline's bar, just 7 miles away from the crime scene.
You just would not have thought he'd actually killed his wife and just come blazingly into a bar a few miles away having a drink. When you hear them things, it's like, really? Could you be so cold-blooded and heartless?
When police take him in for questioning, Hamer repeats his claims that he committed manslaughter due to mental illness. But one throwaway comment soon after his arrest suggests this is a cunning ploy to reduce any impending prison sentence.
And what was a telling piece of evidence? He said to the officers who were tending to him, this was manslaughter, and asked this question: have we done enough for diminished responsibility? This was a man who was trying to present a picture of being so mentally unwell that he was not to be held fully responsible for his wife's death.
This is clearly somebody who's a very manipulative, selfish individual. And his response, he's already trying to escape justice for his crime as soon as he's arrested, and he's clearly given a great deal of thought to that before his arrest. And Ian Hamer clearly only cares about one person, and that's Ian Hamer.
In spite of Hamer's claims, he's charged with his wife's murder. Months later, mental health experts are brought in to provide a true picture of Hamer's state of mind.
After his arrest, he was subsequently interviewed by two psychiatrists to explore whether there were any mental illness elements that would lead to diminished responsibility.
They ask him probing questions about his relationship with wife Joanne.
He began to present what was ultimately going to be his defence. He accepted he had killed her, but in the context where he said he didn't want to do it, and used a phrase that it was some sort of psychotic episode.
Then Hamer starts to go on the offensive, claiming he is the real victim in the abusive marriage.
Ian Hamer claimed that his wife had taunted him to say that their children weren't his. He made a slur on his wife's character, saying she was engaged in extramarital affairs. There's no evidence of this.
He would say that she would see other people, that she would be on dating apps and she would find other men more attractive than him. And anyone who knew Joanne knows that that's just completely laughable and a joke. She was the most loyal woman you could meet. Just sort of making up excuses in his head, I guess, to find ways and motives to do what he did.
Then his claims turn even more extreme.
He made plain that he was himself a victim of domestic abuse. You know, he claims that she hit him over the head with a shoe. We've got no information about any injury, or certainly any serious injury to him. He claims she threw a phone at him. Again, there was no injury that we're aware of to support that. This was all seen as a tissue of lies. And clearly the people that knew Joanne had not seen any evidence of this whatsoever. And the only person who could suggest that this had taken place was Ian Hamer himself.
But soon, the psychiatrists start to uncover Hamer's true colours.
What was actually found by two psychiatrists, one diagnosed him with morbid jealousy and one with obsessive jealousy. But clearly, there wasn't an element of diminished responsibility for his actions. From the facts we know about the case and his behaviour and his actions, come as no surprise because we can see the way that he jealously controlled his wife's movements and behaviour, you know, a real controlling nature.
And when detectives scan Hamer's smartphone, the picture he painted as the victim starts to crumble. Just days before Joanne's murder, they find texts he sent to another woman promising jewellery.
Things he was doing, he would accuse her for. He was seeing other women that came out. He was on dating apps. He would accuse her of the things that he was doing exactly the same.
We do know that Ian Hamer had affairs, he had one-night stands, and he accused his wife of the same. There's no evidence to suggest that that was the case.
But investigators are blown away when they uncover the name Hamer uses on his dating profile. It sounds strikingly familiar.
He'd use a fake name, Sebastian, apparently. He would use to women wherever he was going to maybe go out on these dates and meet people. And yeah, to use a fake name, like you're obviously up to something that's not good.
15 months after Joanne's murder, husband Ian Hamer is finally put on trial at Hull Crown Court. He pleads guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. But the prosecution sets out the case for cold-blooded murder.
So it was a consideration for the jury whether that was a man demonstrating real symptoms of mental illness, or whether it was somebody using any illness to formulate a defence.
The court is told the torrid details of the abuse Hamer inflicted on his wife.
The question that was raised with the jury is whether or not, by the time of the killing, he in effect wanted to get rid of his wife so he could move on, but he needed control of that situation, and that's how we presented the case.
As the trial progresses, even Hamer's own children take to the stand against their own father to describe the abuse suffered in their own home.
One of them spoke of being aware of that from a very young age, and become increasingly toxic and abusive. You then see the horrible human side of this, because they're being required to give evidence against one of their parents, and in circumstances where they've lost the other one. And for them, there's no good outcome to any of this.
Following a heart-wrenching 3-week trial, the jury retires to consider their verdict.
The verdict of the jury was that Ian Hamer was guilty of murder. Therefore, they rejected that idea that his mental state was such that he was not able to exercise proper judgment and control.
He designed everything, including his response to the arresting officer, to make out that this was the case, that it was diminished responsibility. Thankfully, the jury didn't buy that, and they saw through Ian Hamer's excuses for what they were, just excuses.
Hamer's jailed for life with a minimum of 22 years. At the time of sentencing, the judge takes into account the years of domestic violence Joanne suffered at the hands of her husband and his abusive control over her finances.
The judge actually commented that he believed that one of the main motives in this case was he was afraid if the relationship ended that he would lose a significant amount of money. Money to which Joanne, in the law of England and Wales, was entitled to. Those were the family finances that should have been split accordingly. He didn't want that to happen, and he murdered his wife as a result.
Kill someone, go out drinking, using drugs and joking about what he did. He obviously deserves to be locked away for the rest of his life, and I'm glad that's the case.
Killers like Ian Hamer are so manipulative and so self-centred, and ultimately it led to the tragic death of a lovely, caring wife. But there's only one person to blame for that, and it's Ian Hamer.
Years later, the sadness of the case is still felt by those in the quiet Lincolnshire village of Worleby.
There'll always be some weird, I guess, aura for people still living there, knowing that what happened in that house happened, the worst crime you can commit. And I guess it opened a lot of people's eyes to thinking that this can happen anywhere.
I feel so sorry for the family. You know, one act like that and it's wrecked the family. And it's something they'll have to live with, I'm afraid to say, and it's not very nice.
Ian Hamer is definitely a master manipulator. A lovely woman who was taken away from us by a horrible, sadistic man. It was something you never expected to report on, especially in Worleby. I never met Joanne, but I know she was a lovely woman. I know that, you know, she deserved a lot better than Ian Hamer. Truly sad story, a sad situation. All you can do is just hope the best for the Hamer family, of the children. Just an awful situation which Ian Hamer will spend the rest of his life in jail for.
On Friday the 27th of September 2002, the family of 18-year-old Rachel Bruckheimer file a missing person report with Snohomish County Sheriff's Office.
By that point, we knew definitely something is very wrong.
It was not like her to just leave and not get in touch with somebody.
Rachel had left home 4 days earlier on the 23rd of September, and no contact has been made with her since then.
There was a missing person poster for Rachel, and I was in complete shock.
It's 1 week later that police receive a tip-off which will lead them to a grim discovery in a remote forest clearing.
A case like this is going to impact anybody that is aware of it. I wish I could get the details out of my head. I can't.
This is the story of the murder of Rachel Bruckheimer, a jealous ex-boyfriend, and a guns-for-hire drug-dealing gang at the center of the investigation.
There had been concerns raised that she was snitching on them and that there was some amount of retribution to be had.
They were people who were following the orders of an older person who obviously must have intimidated them into doing it.
I didn't have any thought for one moment that he was capable of the evil that he was capable of.
The city of Everett, Washington, is located in the Pacific Northwest, close to the border with Canada.
It's in the middle of Snohomish County, so it's the county just exactly north of Seattle.
You have very wealthy people, you have very highly educated people, and it goes all the way down to very, very poor people.
They do have elevated amount of crime for the size of the city that it is.
On Monday the 23rd of September 2002, 18-year-old Rachel Bruckheimer leaves her home on the Tulalip Reservation near Marysville to meet friends in nearby Everett.
I came home from work and I remember I was really excited to talk to her that day, and I remember thinking, darn, I just missed her. I wanted to talk to her. But then I turned around and I looked on the counter and there was a to-do list that said that she was going to drop off job applications and all of these other little errands. And then at the bottom it said, be home for Jada tonight, which was my daughter. So I remember reading that and thinking, oh, no big deal. I'll just see her later tonight.
It wouldn't be unusual for somebody in that kind of lifestyle to go off partying for 3 or 4 or 5 days. That certainly couldn't have been ruled out at that point.
The following day, Rachel fails to return home, and she is not answering her phone.
Something felt very off, and I remember my mother called me And she said, "Have you heard from Rachel?" And I said, "No, I haven't. And she hasn't been home." She said, "I'm really worried. I talked to her yesterday on the phone in the afternoon, and she said she was going to call me right back, that she was going through a drive-through with a friend." And I never heard back from her.
More days pass, but there is still no sign of Rachel. Then a missed voicemail from one of Rachel's friends sends her family into a panic.
It's 6 a.m. in the morning, and I'm getting ready for work. And I remember the phone ringing at our house. I went running because I knew that was odd. I missed it. There was a voicemail. I listened to the voicemail, and it is her very best friend, Carrie. And her friend Carrie on the voicemail is saying, "Rachel, where are you? Please call me and let me know you're okay. I don't know what's going on." And I called my dad down. He listened to the voicemail, and I'll just never forget seeing his face. He went white. He was in shock.
Rachel's family immediately contact Snohomish County Sheriff's Office.
After Rachel had been missing 4 days, the family went to the police.
Her family reported her missing on Friday, and one of our patrol officers took the missing persons report.
The patrol deputies go out and they ask the general questions. Who, what, when, where, how, and why. When was Rachel last seen? Who was she seen with? What was she wearing? Did she take her purse? Was anything left behind? Who was she supposedly seen with?
Police file a missing person report, but treat the case as a suspected runaway.
Rachel was not a minor. She was 18, and the rules are a little bit different. If she'd been a minor, they probably would have started looking for her right away.
The police would not help us initially. Even though we told them this was not like her personal belongings were still all at home, they said, "She's 18 years old and she has the right to disappear."
Law enforcement resources get stretched really thin, and officers can only be in so many places at once. And unless they have an active crime scene and an active case, they're less likely to kind of take something else on a hunch.
Rachel's family now take matters into their own hands.
Rachel's family did exactly what it needed to do, and they didn't wait for the police to start looking. They created missing posters with her photo.
We had to get the help of all family and friends and volunteers to help post these pictures around of her and to go looking ourselves. We were turning every stone and going from every end of the county and other counties, putting pictures everywhere, asking for help.
The Bruckheimers even traveled to Seattle to put up missing posters.
We're 20 miles from Seattle. It's not unusual for kids and teenagers that are out and about end up down in Seattle, and some of them kids come up here and hang out.
It's at this point, 3 days after her disappearance, that Rachel's family receive an unexpected phone call from her ex-boyfriend.
I got a call from him saying Rachel's car is in my apartment complex. So I immediately left work and I rushed there, and her car was backed in to a parking spot. I immediately knew right when I looked at the car that she did not park that car, because my sister never, ever backed into parking spots. That's typically something guys do. I looked into the car and her wallet was on the seat with her ID, $80 cash. The car was unlocked and the driver's side seat was all the way back.
The front seat, indicating who was driving the vehicle, was not pulled all the way up like a little short Rachel was driving the car. It was pushed all the way back, indicating a very tall person had parked the car there.
Whoever knew where she was or whatever happened to her, they're the ones that parked this car. So we called the police, and that's when they finally took us serious and agreed that there was foul play involved.
Police now launch an investigation into Rachel's disappearance.
I came back to work on the following Tuesday morning, and the case had been assigned to me over the weekend.
Detective Pence and I got the case. We made a subsequent appointment to meet with her father so we could get additional information.
When I met with the family, they were all there. Her dad, Bill, is the one that I dealt with the most, and he made it real clear that he did not believe that Rachel had just gone off somewhere voluntarily and didn't get in touch with the family.
Investigators ask questions about Rachel's life for any clues as to why she would suddenly disappear without informing her family or friends. They soon learn about one abusive ex-boyfriend called John Diggy Anderson. Rachel had dated Anderson while he was serving time in prison.
She told me that he was a bad boy, and this was the first bad boy that she had dated that was never her type. And he had a presence about him because everybody was afraid of him. It was some sort of intrigue with that for her, but that wasn't her usual type.
Bill shared the information about John Anderson and that group of friends that John Anderson had with him, and he shared the name of another individual that Rachel was acquainted with and that group of friends, and they were both in two different areas. The one was down in the Linwood, Edmonds area, and the other one was out in the Lake Stevens area.
Police receive more information from the community and begin to build a picture of the events leading up to the day of Rachel's disappearance.
A few of her friends called and let us know when the last time they saw her and what she was doing and where she was at. And then we got some information from family members of some of these people that were involved in this.
One tip-off from the mother of Rachel's friend, Jeffrey Barth, is of particular interest to investigators.
Barth's mom called and let us know that there was a lot of strange things happening in the other half of the duplex. The individuals that lived there were very shady. She was very suspicious that Rachel had been over at that duplex and something bad had happened to her.
The occupant of the duplex is 32-year-old Yusuf Jihad, who lives there with his girlfriend Trish Connor and her young daughter.
Jeffrey Barth's mother had seen Rachel at the duplex directly next door to where she lived. She saw her arrive in a red Jeep. We did some follow-up and we found that the red Jeep was actually registered to a 17-year-old by the name of Matthew Durham.
Investigators learn that Matthew Durham, Jeffrey Barth, and Yusuf Jihad were all friends with Rachel's ex-boyfriend, John Diggy Anderson.
We took several of the detectives that I work with and we drove down to the duplex and knocked on the door and started talking to people. A couple of them didn't want to talk to us at all. The ones that we did talk to, they said that they knew Rachel, but they hadn't seen her in a long, long time, and just pretty much denied everything.
Later that night, after police leave, neighbours report some suspicious activity amongst the friendship group.
The individuals that were involved were seen cleaning the garage, hauling a bunch of stuff out of the duplex. They were seen with a rolled up blanket and they put it in the back of Matthew Durham's Jeep and he drove off. After we got additional information from Barth's mom and other witnesses there at the scene, we developed enough probable cause to get a search warrant for the duplex.
September 2002, Snohomish County, Washington. 18-year-old Rachel Bruckheimer is reported missing by her family after she fails to return home from visiting friends in Everett.
She was last seen on the 23rd Her family looked for her for several days, and then she was reported missing on the 27th, and they were very worried about her.
She was one that could walk into a room and make anyone laugh, anyone smile, anyone feel better. She had these beautiful crystal blue eyes and this big, beautiful smile, and this just did not seem like this was really happening.
A tip-off from the community leads investigators to an apartment on Merino Avenue in South Everett, 20 miles from where Rachel lived. Investigators obtain a search warrant and call in the FBI to assist them with gathering evidence.
We had requested assistance from the FBI crime scene team. They were going to conduct the search of the duplex for us. We got down there and started interviewing some of the key players in this, and their stories weren't matching up very well. And finally got enough information that, yes, something happened, and something happened with Matthew Durham's Jeep.
Detectives now search for 17-year-old Matthew Durham and his red Jeep. Could he provide them with new information about Rachel's disappearance?
We had a search warrant for Matthew Durham's Jeep based on the information we'd got the night before. The two detectives first went looking for him at the school to see if they could find the Jeep and recover it. And when that didn't happen, they went over to his house and knocked on the door to try and interview him and to obtain the Jeep that we had the search warrant for.
Durham said that he had seen her approximately 10 days ago at the Manor Market, and that he really didn't initially have any further information about her whereabouts. But he was interviewed again, and that's when the real break in the case came.
Matthew Durham reveals to police a complicated history between Rachel and his circle of friends who call themselves the Northwest Mafia.
The Northwest Mafia was this group of young criminals. They sold drugs, they committed burglaries. It wasn't real serious. They were just a group of kids committing crimes.
Durham informs police that the leader of the Northwest Mafia is 32-year-old Yusuf Jihad, who runs the gang from his Merino Avenue duplex.
Yusuf was trying to get his life together. He had come up from California, and he was on probation in California and was not supposed to be out of the state.
Other gang members include John Whitaker, Jeffrey Barth, and Rachel's ex-boyfriend, John Diggy Anderson.
John Anderson had been in jail before. He had a record when Rachel met him.
He was a hardcore criminal. He'd been dealing with the criminal justice system from about the time he was 11.
During their relationship, Anderson displays many signs of abusive behavior towards Rachel.
He didn't like her having any male friends whatsoever, and Rachel was a social butterfly. He even waited in the bushes at a party that she went to make sure that there weren't any other guys there, and there were, and he caused a commotion.
It's very hard to understand the relationship that they had, especially since he was a violent person and previously incarcerated.
Rachel's family soon became aware of her involvement with Anderson and urged her to leave him.
I only found out about him through my sister telling me that she was dating a new guy that she met at a high school party.
Rachel started talking to John Anderson while he was in prison. They spoke on the phone many times, and so that made him concerned, knowing that his daughter is talking to someone in prison.
Rachel's abusive relationship with Anderson began after a particularly traumatic period in her life.
During that time, she was already feeling more vulnerable. She had faced a lot of loss in her life. One of her best friends, named Corey, who she considered more like a soulmate, was killed tragically in a car accident.
That forever changed Rachel. It changed her whole being, to be honest. That was the turning point for her. It really changed her whole course of life because she started doing things and hanging around with people that she never, ever would have in the past.
Rachel eventually breaks up with Anderson and briefly dates his former roommate.
Rachel started dating one of John Anderson's friends. They were both into drugs and that kind of lifestyle, but because Rachel was now dating him, John Anderson hated this other guy.
I just told her to be very, very careful, to be very cautious, be aware of her surroundings, to be smart, and just stay away from him. She was very, very concerned because he was threatening her safety.
Anderson kept trying to get a hold of Rachel because he wanted to talk to her. At one point, Rachel invited Anderson and the whole group to a drinking party at a hotel in Everett. Whitaker and Jihad decided that they were going to go to this party. They pull into the parking lot of this hotel and they could see all of these young people on the balcony of this hotel drinking and having fun. Well, they spotted John Anderson's ex-roommate. In their minds, they decided that Rachel was trying to set them up and get them robbed or get them killed.
Anderson, already fueled by jealousy, is now under pressure from his fellow gang members to act.
Jihad and Whitaker were convinced that she was trying to get them killed and that she was betraying them and that it was up to John Anderson to deal with it because she was his ex-girlfriend.
John Diggy Anderson now hatches a twisted plan to kidnap Rachel and punish her for the alleged betrayal of the Northwest Mafia gang. Snohomish County, Washington. Police investigating the case of 18-year-old Rachel Bruckheimer are closing in on the gang that they believe are responsible for her disappearance. Rachel was last seen by her family on Monday, the 23rd of September, and has been missing for over a week.
This seemed like something out of a movie. This seemed like something that happened to other people. But I did think that whoever she's been hanging out with has something to do with this. Somebody knows something.
Investigators learned that Rachel was involved with a gang of small-time criminals, calling themselves the Northwest Mafia. Investigators question gang member Matthew Durham, who informs them of the plot by Rachel's ex-boyfriend John Diggy Anderson and fellow gang member Maurice Rivas to kidnap Rachel in revenge for betraying them to a rival gang.
Rachel was going to hang out with Maurice Rivas and Nate Lovelace, and she had met with them at Nate's house.
Maurice and Durham were there with Rachel while all of this was going on. They were going to have her park in the garage, and then these guys were going to grab her and deal with it.
But the gang's original plan to kidnap Rachel now changes.
The kid that lived there chickened out and told everybody that his dad was expected to come home early so that they couldn't do it in his garage anymore. John Anderson called Durham and told him to grab Rachel and bring her down to the duplex, even if it means putting a gun to her head.
That is when they kind of performed a ruse and said, Rachel, Diggy wants to talk to you, so we're going to go over there and hang out.
Rachel said, fine, I need to talk to him anyway. So she agreed to go down there voluntarily.
So they brought Rachel to the Merino Drive address, which ended up being the address of a Kevin Youssef Jihad and his girlfriend, Trissa Connor.
John Anderson is not there at the time. I later found out he was out back supposedly trying to dig a hole.
Rachel was enjoying herself with her friends, smoking some marijuana and playing some games and laughing.
They were just hanging out, talking. Youssef Jihad, Maurice Rivas Rachel, Matt Durham. Jeff Barth is also in the house at that point.
But the mood changes suddenly when John Anderson arrives.
He comes in and sees everybody sitting around the couch having a good time with Rachel, and he blows up. He's mad.
He ended up getting in a fist fight with Jeff Barth, and he had punched a couple of the guys. And then Rachel and Rivas and Matt were going to leave, and that's when John Anderson grabbed her by the arm.
He grabs her by the hair, hits her in the face, and knocks her down behind a couch.
Tony Williams was a cousin of Trissa Connor. He happened to be there also. He supplied the tape and actually helped tape up her hands. John Anderson ended up putting a sock in her mouth because she started to cry. And they also turned up the music to drown out her cries for help. They bound her and gagged her and had her in the garage of the duplex.
After Rachel had been kidnapped and held in the garage for several hours, everybody knows what's going on. They're all standing around. They're doing a lot of cocaine. They order pizza. They're all trying to figure out exactly what's going to happen.
Yusef's girlfriend, Trissa Connor, had come home while Rachel was in the garage, tied up, and she was upset because all these people are in her house.
She's looking for Jihad, and she can't find him. And everybody's acting a little suspicious. She tries to go to the garage, but the door's locked. So she's knocking on the door, demanding that they let her in to the garage.
Trissa was a decent person. She had a young daughter, and she was going to school for nursing. She walks into the garage, and she sees Rachel tied up and crying. She sees her mouth bound. She goes back into the house, grabs a knife, and tries to cut her hands free. And at that point, Diggy gets involved and stops her from doing it.
Her boyfriend Jihad was there. She started screaming at him, and she was screaming like, "Get that out of my house. Get her the hell out of here. I don't want this going on at my house."
Rachel was put in the bag and was carried out to Matt Durham's red Jeep. And Maurice Rivas rode in the back with Rachel while Matt Durham drove.
They drove around for a long time because John Anderson had told John Whitaker to go and get rid of her.
John Whitaker, Matt Durham, and Maurice Rivas all ride in the red Jeep. They knew that she was going to be killed. I don't think they knew it entirely, but I think that they knew it was going to go down. It was going to happen.
Whitaker and his fellow gang members have no plan for what to do next with Rachel.
They drove around for several hours trying to figure out what to do, and then they decided that they were going to go back and get John Anderson and let him deal with it.
They pulled over and they stopped at a trailhead. Maurice Rivas gets out of the vehicle with Rachel in the bag, and they stay there for a period of time while Matt Durham goes and picks up John Anderson.
Rachel is now alone in the wilderness with Maurice Rivas, whom she previously considered to be a close friend.
She spoke about Maurice a lot. It was this friend of hers that she really liked. They were going to attempt to, go back to school, get on the right track.
While Maurice and Rachel were at this trailhead, Maurice took the tape off of her mouth and had a conversation with her. She was very afraid that they were going to kill her. Maurice was trying to convince her that he didn't think that was going to happen. Rachel begged him that if she was going to have to die, to please shoot her because she didn't want to drown.
She figured at that point something bad was going to happen because she cried to Maurice to not let John Diggy drown her. She had a fear of being drowned, of water, and she didn't want to be drowned.
The other group comes back, they pick her up, they put her in the Jeep, and they drive out by Gold Bar to a remote area where there's a lot of four-wheel driving and dirt bike riding.
At that point, Matt Durham, John Whitaker, John Diggy Anderson, and Maurice Rivas were all present. They drove her up there late at night off of Reeder Road, and they splintered off of one of these side dirt roads.
They get to a location that John Anderson picked, and they get out and they start digging a grave. The grave was mostly dug by Maurice, Whitaker, and John Anderson. Durham was a little sick to his stomach, so he sat in the Jeep during most of this.
She saw them digging her grave. It must just be the most traumatic thing that you could witness. But at some point, she reconciled somehow that they were going to kill her, and she would do it her way if she could. She knew she was going to die.
At that time, Rachel was released out of the bag. She was told to strip down. John Anderson was armed with a gun at that point.
And they had her kneel in the grave. While she was down there, apparently she was praying. John Anderson was quoted as saying, "Don't worry, you'll be with him soon," and then began shooting.
Matt Durham was sitting in the vehicle. He had heard a gunshot. He had heard some yelling, and he heard Anderson say, "Get on your knees and get in there," something to that effect.
He fired once or twice, then the gun jammed. He ejected that round and fired another couple of times.
Once they put her in the hole and they shot her, they buried her back up. They covered the grave up as best they could. It was dark and late at night, so they didn't really know how good of a job they did. They drove themselves out of there and left her behind.
Snohomish County, Washington. Police investigating the disappearance of 18-year-old Rachel Bruckheimer believe she has been murdered by her ex-boyfriend, John Diggy Anderson, and his gang, the Northwest Mafia. One gang member, 17-year-old Matthew Durham, confesses to his role in the crime and offers to take police to Rachel's unmarked grave in the Cascade Mountains.
After we had Matthew Durham in custody, he took the detectives to the gravesite.
We would do video of the location of where it was. So the Reeder Road area, the turnoff to where the dirt was, where we turned off, and then video all the way up to the gravesite. We had an idea of where the grave was. One of the detectives took a shovel, and just because we had to verify that it was in fact a grave, that there was somebody there before we took our next steps. So he took a scoop of dirt out, and immediately we could see flesh.
The morning that Durham had taken my partners to the gravesite, I went to Bill's house and told him what I knew. When we found the body, I let him know right away that Rachel had been recovered.
I was woken up by my dad. It was 7 a.m. in the morning, and he woke me up and he said, "Detective Pence is here." So I came downstairs, and Detective Pence had a look in his eyes. You could tell he was sad. And he told us that Rachel had been discovered and that we were just waiting on identity with her dental records, but that they had found her. And at that moment, my dad and I had to drive to my mom's house to tell her the news that her daughter is dead. And I just remember it being this really eerie, foggy, gray morning, and she opened the door, and I remember we were just looking at her with tears in her eyes, and she just knew, and she let out this horrible scream, and she just fell to the floor. And it was awful. We were just in shock.
Police now move to recover evidence and apprehend all the suspects involved in Rachel's murder.
After the detectives found where the grave was, we notified the medical examiner's office, and the next morning is when we showed back up with our crime scene van that had all of our equipment. That's when we started to process all the area around the grave. We would pick up or photograph any tire tracks that were there. We would photograph and pick up cigarette butts, pieces of paper, anything that we thought could have tied a suspect to that incident.
When other detectives were out at the gravesite trying to locate evidence out there, I was dealing with Matthew Durham and his attorney, and Matthew Durham agreed to take me and show me where all of the evidence had been disposed of. They took Rachel's clothing to an abandoned cul-de-sac in the Linwood area and burnt all of her clothing. And her rings and jewelry were at that same location. They took the gun that had been used to kill her to is a little pond down in South Snohomish County next to the freeway. They threw the handgun in there. They took the bag that she'd been transported in and threw it in some trees there in the Everett area. And that was pretty much most of the evidence that we recovered.
Investigators now move to arrest the remaining gang members still at large.
Saturday evening, there was a party at this juvenile's house where Rachel originally was going to be attacked. I got a call. John Anderson was at this party. So I sent patrol over to lock the place down and to get everybody out of the house as best they could. Maurice Rivas was there. I didn't know that initially, but he was one of them that we were looking for. So he was arrested. John Anderson would not come out of the house. He apparently climbed up in the attic. So we ended up getting a search warrant for the place, and our SWAT team eventually went in and arrested him out of the attic.
The remaining gang members have fled the area following the news coverage of the case.
We tracked Whitaker, Barth, and Jihad to California.
Investigators contact federal law enforcement agencies to assist them with apprehending the suspects.
We had a description of the vehicle that they had fled in. We used cell phone tower information for location. And through LAPD and the Fugitive Task Force, we were able to do live tracking of the cell phone. We had an area down in LA where they kept hitting on one particular tower. The Fugitive Task Force members saw the vehicle pulling into this little strip hotel and took them down and arrested all of them.
Each day, it seemed there was yet another suspect, and it just kept going. And we just couldn't believe what was happening and how many were involved. It was unreal.
Tony Williams started off, we were treating him more like a witness, but his cooperation level dwindled a little bit, so he was eventually arrested and charged. Nate Lovelace started off being a witness, but he also ended up being charged in this case. All in all, there were 8 people charged.
The 3 ringleaders go on trial in Snohomish County Courthouse for murder in the first degree.
The first trial was Yusuf Jihad, the oldest of the bunch. He was tried and found guilty. Then it was John Anderson's trial, and then John Whitaker was the third trial. Barth and Tony Williams pled guilty to first-degree kidnapping in exchange for their testimony against the other 3 defendants. Maurice Rivas and Matthew Durham pled guilty to first-degree murder in exchange for their cooperation with this case. And Nate Lovelace pled guilty to rendering criminal assistance in the first degree.
The hardest thing for Rachel's family is the years that it took to try these young men. There were trials and retrials, and it's really important to families to show up, to be there, because they want to remind the people who killed their child that they are representing Rachel in the courtroom, because she can't be there.
It was horrible. To try to restrain yourself from someone who viciously killed your family, and to have to sit there and just look at them. You can't do anything, you can't say anything. It was like you're in a prison yourself.
Victim support services got involved from the very beginning. We can kind of explain how the system works, what to expect. And with that many defendants, that is a lot. So we had a few advocates stepping in to help navigate all of the systems they were thrown into.
All of these defendants had several hearings in front of the judge, and the Berkheimer family was there at every one of them. They were in court probably hundreds of times. They had to sit there and listen to details of what happened to Rachel, and also listen to attorneys make silly arguments of why their clients shouldn't be held responsible for what they did.
The cruelty of John Diggy Anderson towards Rachel's family continues, even in the courtroom.
He would come into that courtroom before the judge and the jurors would enter, and he would come in with a big smile on his face. And he would smile at us and nod, and he would turn around and look at us, and he would laugh, and he would wink, and he would taunt us and mock us. He showed zero remorse. He was actually really happy about what he did.
He doesn't care who he hurts and harms and who he brings down with him, just no remorse whatsoever. And that can be very frustrating for victims that choose to sit in the courtroom and face the offenders. They can re-victimize the victim sitting there in court.
Rachel's family are left wondering if her murder could have been prevented.
Clearly, John Anderson is the one that pushed it as far as it did. But he was also being pushed by Whitaker and Jihad to deal with her.
For some reason, Trissa didn't call the police. She could have saved her life had she called the police. Yusef Jihad was calling the shots. He was the oldest. It happened in his house. He could have said, along with Trissa, no, you guys aren't coming here.
So you have a range of ages, which creates some amount of power differential in terms of people having a bit more authority in telling others what to do. You also have a bunch of kids that don't have the neurocognitive functioning to think through the bigger picture of this, and they're only focused in what's in the moment, what's in front of them right now, what's the next answer to the next problem, and not seeing the bigger picture.
Rachel's family continue to have mixed feelings about the criminal justice system.
I will never, ever drop my high regards and gratitude for the prosecution and the detectives that worked on my sister's case. I hold them as heroes. But the system itself has completely just devastated myself and my family all over again.
I believe they were very relieved that everybody that was taken to trial was convicted, and that the others that were involved had agreed to be convicted of various crimes.
I think all of them are absolute just scum of the earth, because I don't know how a human being could do those acts to another human being. I have lost all faith and all respect for the justice system. In fact, I don't think there's any justice at all. I don't believe in it. I don't trust in it. I'm sickened by it. I'm angry at it. I'm hurt by it.